Yesterday, we ended with a cute little blonde in the other class that changed my life in college. The class was horse production, senior level class, and it was a required class for those in the School of Agriculture, but here was this cute little blonde, may have weighed 95 pounds and about 5'3" tall, and she was always late to class. The first 5 weeks or so of class, she came in late. And it was okay because the instructor was later than she was. Now, I found out later the reason she was late. The campus at Oklahoma State University is a mile square. And the horse production class was in the very northwest corner of that mile. She was getting out of a class where she was in water safety instructor. So she's in the swimming pool at the far southeast corner. She had to get out of the pool, get dry, and tromp a half a mile or a mile diagonally across campus to get to class. And so she always came in late. And so one day I'm walking to class with John King. John King was a rancher down in New Mexico, and he still is. Good friend. And we're walking to class, and as boys will, we were talking about girls, and I said, that little blonde, I think I'll have her sit by me today. And King said, y'all bet you can't do that. And I said, I'll take that bet. And we bet a glass of milk and a donut over at the Dairy Barn immediately after horse production class. That cost a nickel, by the way. The donut was a nickel and the glass of milk was a nickel. So it was a dime bet. Well, we came into class, and of course we were there on time, and I got to arrange the classroom the way I wanted. And the door coming into the classroom was on the side of the chairs, so that we had rows of chairs going up toward the front. And I put a boy in the first chair of every row, except the front row, and I put Cherry Easterly in the first seat and Patsy Nix in the next seat. Had an empty seat, and then I sat there, and King sat next to me. And of course, all the boys knew what we were doing. I mean, everybody in the class did. And so she comes trotting in, her usual 2 or 3 minutes late, glanced across the room, and I'd watched her before, and she liked to sit with the girls, and so she came trotting up to where they were. The only seat available where she didn't have to step across a boy's legs was between me and Patsy Nix. And so she plopped down, and I turned to King and I said, I'll take that milk and donut right after class. And of course, everybody in the class broke up laughing. I learned later that she thought she had forgotten to button up her blouse up her back as she got out of the swimming pool, and she thought they were laughing at her. But the instructor came, and he just passed around a sheet that we all signed in. Well, that was the first time I'd seen her name, and she signed it Kamari Berry. I thought it sounded like some disease went on around, and so that's how I first got her name. Well, the end of that week, we had a lab, and I didn't have a car, and the lab was outside of town a little ways, and I had one of my friends drive me out there in his car, and I got there 10, 15 minutes early, and she's out there sitting up on the corral fence. Well, now, I grew up in a family that teased all the time. Hers didn't. They weren't allowed to tease anybody. And so, wanting to get acquainted anyway, I walked up beside her and I said, what's a girl like you doing in a class like this? And boy, she bristled up. Let me know she had as much right to be in that class as anybody. And I said, I'll bet you can't even ride a horse. And she was built to ride a horse. Nice, just a nice shape with nice long legs, and she was just built to look good on a horse. And she bristled again, and she said, well, why don't you come out and watch me ride? Well, that's really what I was wanting. And so I said, fine, I'll do that. And so I borrowed my roommate's car that afternoon, and she had told me how to get out there. And when I got there, she had a riding arena, and she had 7 or 8 students in the riding arena, and they're going around on these, they're in English saddles, and they're all posting. I'd never touched an English saddle before. In fact, I'd never seen one in person. I'd seen them in pictures. So I'm standing there with my elbows rested on the fence watching what's going on, and she had them doing something, and she came over and she said, "Would you like to ride a horse?" And yeah, I said, "I'd love to." I said, "But I want a saddle. I don't want one of those pancakes that y'all are riding." And she bristled a little bit again, and she said, "Over there's that bay that's in the corral in front of the barn." He was the only one in there. She said, "Join the tack room, pick out anything you want, and ride him." So I went over and caught the colt up, put a halter on him. He was easy to catch. He was gentle. And I walked in the tack room and found a nice Western saddle and took it out. And I had him facing the tack room. And I threw the saddle up on his back, put a blanket on him, threw the saddle on his back, and he bowed up. Now, if you know anything about horses, when you put a saddle on, if they bow their back up, they're apt to pitch with you. And particularly if you cinch it up tight and the back of that saddle is raised off of their back, that's an indicator that they're going to buck. Well, I didn't care if he bucked. I hadn't had any practice, and I'm paying part of my way through college riding bareback broncs and bulls in rodeo. And so I turned him around and faced him out into the corral before I cinched him up. And I cinched him up good and tight. And normally what you would do with a horse that has their back raised is you'd lead them around for a little while. And sometimes that'll settle him down. But I wanted him to buck. And so I pulled his nose around to the stirrup and put my foot in it and landed in the stirrup and turned his head loose and kicked him. And sure enough, across the arena we went. Big old high rolling buck. He was a young colt, and he didn't really know how to buck. But anyway, he bucked around there for a little while, and he finally settled down, and we were just walking and trotting around the arena or the corral. And the corral had a gate on it that had a slide bar. It was a 6-foot high gate, had a slide bar that kept it locked. Well, there wasn't anything else in the corral, so I just rode him over close to it and took my foot and kicked the slide bar so that the gate would open. Gate opened, and all the kids are in her riding class are lined up next to the fence, and she is too. And I waved to him, and I said, "I'll be back in a little bit." And I'm out in a 160-acre pasture then, and so we went into a high rolling buck out across the pasture. In about 40 minutes, 30 minutes, I came back, and her class was over. And when I got back there, her dad's standing there. Now, her arena was setting to where he could see out of his office window. He could watch over his daughter and what she was doing. And so he and I visited for a while. She introduced me to him. And he hired me that afternoon to work for him. He had a general handyman, Brother Keller, and he said he needs some help. And when I met Mr. Keller, he did need some help. He was getting older in years. He took care of all of the mowing, and they had a lot of mowing. They had a lot of grass down around the lakes and ponds. And so anyway, he hired me, and so I went to work for him because I was needing some money. You can always use a little more money. And come to find out that the colt had never been ridden. Because I was arrogant, she was going to get my nose stuck in the dirt, so she thought. Anyway, I rode the colt and went ahead and broke him over the next while, and we'll continue this saga from Camari's viewpoint starting tomorrow. Have a good day.